right, it is at the time of 7:05 on July 7th, 2022, and we are at 7:05, and we are gonna call the meeting to order with a quorum. I want to welcome Sue Shockett, our new representative from Precinct 8 to the committee. So we're gonna do our best to kind of update her and fill her in on what we've been doing. Our goal tonight is to kind of go over some of our revisions and suggestions. Doug will have some things up on the board, so hopefully the sun will kind of change and we'll be able to see them a little bit better. And David, we just got some of your recommendations emailed in, so we'll go over those. But I will start with a brief update. So the Bylaw Committee, we have been meeting now for quite a few months. We are back to a full committee of 8 members, a representative from each precinct. We are going over just the general bylaws, that first section, making our recommendations. After our committee votes and decides on our recommendations, those will go to town administrator, town council, and board of select. We are hoping to get some recommendations on the town warrant for fall town meeting, and we anticipate that we will also be asking for an extension for a few of the general bylaws that are just not ready to be revised yet. Does that sound right, Sue? Do you need feel free to bump in with any questions when you have them.
So far, so good.
Doug and I kind of communicated a little bit today, so we'll go through our list of bylaws. David sent over some recommendations, and I think we can at least make a short list of ones that we will recommend no action on, and ones that we have minor changes to go over. So, all right, we ready?
Yeah, I have got that.
Okay.
How do you want
So-
to do it?
Our first one is the general provisions. So that section, we had already said that was a no action section, as far as I had for my notes. The next
Oh,
one,
Just,
no, go right ahead, David.
yeah, I have a question. Since we're supposed to be reviewing all of these things, do you want to have a vote on each of these chapters? Or, as they come up, even if it's no action? Or do you,
That was a question I was gonna have. Do we want to vote on it as a section, or do we want to vote on it individually
As a
on each
block?
warrant? Each chapter.
Can we vote without everybody else here?
We have a quorum,
We have
so
four. So
Does my vote count on this?
you were sworn in, so.
you were sworn in, so
Okay.
yes, it does.
But do we want to put her in that position? She's-
True.
Well, and that's why I'm
So-
kind of wondering if we just go through them. We can even do a vote by email too.
Well, we could, we have to figure out about the next meeting.
Yes.
And so we may have time to review some of the recommended changes and work on redrafting. I don't think anything is
No.
as good as what David did.
So David, you know what, so why don't we go through them?
okay,
And then we can
Overachiever.
write out the language for motions, and then maybe our next meeting, we can kind of just have the language already written out for each chapter, and one person
Get
can
through
kind of make that motion and read through each one.
okay.
Does that sound like a plan?
If I think I understand what you're proposing, and I like it.
All right. The next, so if we're going in order of how the chapters are written, the next one is animal control, which is still one that we are gonna defer on. That we're gonna put that on for the fall for asking for an extension on that one. Then we have chapter 13, which is bonds. I have that we recommended no action on that one.
Couldn't remember and I couldn't find it in my notes, so.
Okay, let me,
Based on our notes and our questions that we had put forth to Jim Johnson.
So there are two different bonds. There's the revolving funds and then 187, which is, I guess, a little different. I didn't remember talking to Jim on this one.
As far as our questions that we had,
No, you know
we
what?
didn't have any we didn't
Okay,
even have
that
any
was it.
questions
We had no
for Jim.
questions. Yeah.
but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to take any action, because as I recall, we invited Jim and Glenn here at the last meeting so that we could ask all of our questions that pertain to chapters that implicated the select board specifically.
Yep.
So there are other chapters that do not implicate the select board that we may want to do, other things with.
Although I just pulled the language up, so it's pretty limited.
Yes.
I'm just pulling everything up on
Can
my.
you see that?
No.
Literally what?
Not at all, not even close. No, now I know for next time. to
Shall be
bring
the duty of the
laptop.
select board to take charge of all bonds of all town officials / employees and deposit them with the town accountant for safety. That is the bylaw. So, the question is it no action? Do we wanna change this? Do we wanna revise it in any way? You know, that's,
Did we have no questions because there's
it's,
no questions?
Yeah, and that one
seems
did,
like that's the proper
section
place
was-
for it to be.
right, the section was the select board, and that was one that we did not
Mhm.
have any
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
So that's one that I had listed as we would be looking at for no action. The next one is chapter 17, which are our permanent committee, permanent building committee.
And we had talked at the last meeting about when the permanent building committee is involved, and if there's a threshold to trigger when they come in, and if it's a dollar value, if it's a percentage of the project, if it's up to the committee itself to decide whether they wanna recommend something, so, I have very, this is something that I was kinda looking for Jeff to lead, cause he's on the committee, but I kinda threw in some language, if I can find it. Finance committee, rec committee. Maybe I have to go.
And
You know,
this
maybe
one-
I didn't
This one we
on this
kind of
one.
talked
Yeah.
quickly about, and because Jeff is also a member of the permanent building, like tonight, I would not feel comfortable voting on any language changes without asking for his opinion as well on that one.
So, yeah, so we talked about all these different things. Do we do it based on a dollar value? So I just did some just added that the committee at its discretion could involve itself in any type of municipal construction or renovation project regardless of its funding source. Can involve itself in any municipal construction or renovation project regardless of its funding source when the contract value is $5 million or more. So they're basically involved in all municipal buildings or renovations now, and if it's a larger project, they may or may not involve themselves now.
I didn't even realize there was a permanent building committee.
Select board appointed committee, there's 3 members, I think.
There should be 7 members, so that committee is not fully appointed right now, and the permanent building committee has to have members involved in many of the municipal projects. It's usually, so part of like the MSBA, the middle school project, a permanent building committee member has to also be on that committee as well.
Yeah, and there was extensive discussion at the last meeting as to exactly which projects the permanent building committee should involve itself with. And there was sort of 2 sides that were presented. One was, well, there's 2 sides and a middle ground. The one side was there should be sort of a hard black and white line where, if the amount is greater than this, then the committee is involved, and if it's less, then there isn't. The other side was more of a, how to say it, purely discretionary. And then, should, the building committee should sort of figure out on its own, like maybe when it's asked, or maybe on its own initiative, should involve itself in projects.
Yeah.
And the concern there was that, there may be, the language says, working on, construction or additions to municipal buildings. And so the thought was, well, what if a window breaks? Does the permanent building committee really need to get involved in that? And I think the balance position here is, I think, what Doug's put together. It draws a bright line, but then says the committee has discretion whether or not to take on the project.
So it's more so that the committee would be able to vote yes or no as a committee. Do we want to be involved in a roofing, in window, new project? No. Do we need to be involved in a large fields municipal project? Yes. buildings such as the DPW. We've had so much construction that there's things that they've been involved in and other projects they have not.
Okay.
They kind of kick in when there's a project,
Mhm.
and otherwise they're just kind of dormant.
Yeah.
It seems to be the way that it goes.
Um,
And the other question was about the fields. Jeff was saying, are we involved with the building on the fields, but we weren't involved with the fields? So should it be building or should it be a different word?
Right, if somebody wants to erect a concession stand, say, down the road, or make
Oh,
other improvements.
So the building committee was not involved in the huge 1A Fields project?
No, because it was not a permit, it was not a municipal building,
It's a field.
which is why we're looking at this language we're changing, yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's why
Because the permanent building committee will work quite a bit, such as, like I said, the middle school. They were very much part of interviewing the vetting with contracts and the company that was hired and things like that. So that committee needs engineers, architects, lawyers, certain fields, so construction. So it has a very important job. But we need to work on the language. But so tonight, we'll make sure Doug sends us, these revisions out to everyone so that we can review it. And Jeff can then, add some revisions and Brad and Pat if they feel like there's more should be added to it.
yeah. One thing that I noticed is that the 5 million number sounded a little bit high to what I remember. I remember they're talking about 2 million.
I was just throwing something at the wall, see what
Okay.
stuck. So
Yeah,
the value can be, I didn't remember a specific value. I remembered they talked about the fields, and so I picked 5 million. It was nothing more than that.
Okay, yeah, because the lower the number that is, the more projects that they could possibly exercise their discretion on.
Absolutely.
So that's a sort of a calibration for,
Yeah, and this is why I was kind of gonna take Jeff's recommendation of whatever he wanted to be involved in. But yeah, I agree,
We have
It's
to
a big
start
number.
somewhere with putting
Yep.
yes.
stages.
start in the middle and argue from there.
So the next one is Chapter 22, which is the Building Maintenance Advisory Committee.
Yep.
So what I had listed for that change was that we would recommend that would be removed. This is a committee that has not been, is another appointed committee that has not been appointed for like 15 years, like a number of years. And it's supposed to provide, the committee is supposed to be appointed and tour every municipal building and create a list of, where that building stands, the projects that need to be done, and report to town meeting once a year. That role, talking about things that are more pertinent and timely and how is it best practice now, that role is really department heads and our town
Capital
department,
budget.
our building and maintenance department. So that is no longer a current and active committee and hasn't.
It seems
for
like if it
years.
hasn't done anything in the past 15 years, it's safe to cross that one off.
And, our departments are very good about getting 5-year plans, and those are usually on our capital budget committee is going through those projects, whether it's windows, roofing, flooring into school, like those go in the 5-year plans, those come from the departments. So that, right now, that was the action on that one, is that chapter 22 would be recommended to be removed.
Mhm.
Chapter 34 is compensation and additional. Do we
I
have
didn't
anything
have
for
anything
that?
on 32 or 39 just yet.
34, yeah, I have that as Pat to look at.
Yep.
I don't think I put that in I'm looking through my list and I'm not seeing that in my list actually.
The language is up there if people don't have it. No town officer and/or salaried employee of the town or any agent. I probably don't have to read the whole thing.
I've got this on paper. I'm the only one that can't see it, I think, right?
Oh, and what, was it Sue?
Yes.
All of the current version of the bylaws is also on the E-code
Code
360.
360. It's just a website. So
It's a
I can-
website, yeah.
Okay.
So if you search in any search engine for E-code 360,
And it's really what you're looking at there. You've got a printed version of it.
Yeah.
Just-
Okay.
and then
Oh, it's
and
right there.
Walpole.
Yeah.
They compile, bylaws and ordinances from hundreds and hundreds of cities, so.
Okay.
But I didn't have any notes for 34 or 39, so I don't,
And I did not see any notes, I did not have any recollection of that being mentioned in our past meetings, so I had it down as no action. So we will follow up, those both fall, do they both fall under Pat?
yeah, 34 and 30.
Okay. So let's follow up with Pat, he was not able to make it tonight, and see if he had anything else in there. Those two.
That brings us to David's masterpiece.
So this brings us to chapter 45, which is town council.
Okay, so we skipped over 39?
39 also is contract and purchasing, which we had under Pat. I have that as a no action, no changes. In our last meetings, I have not had anything come in front of us of recommendations.
Doug, were you gonna take a look at that?
At what, I'm sorry?
The chapter 39.
I was, and I haven't gotten to it. And so that was something that Pat and I were gonna look at, and I haven't gotten there yet. And I don't know, not sure if Pat's done anything or not.
Okay.
I'm gonna pull up what you said.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
And so we'll get all the
There
emails
it
and
is.
minutes and everything updated to you and sent out. I think I have it in a Google folder that I can share with you. Okay.
All right, I like your other version better, because now I can't. There we go.
So Doug did everything by a Word doc with track for each chapter that we were going to make recommendations on.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you.
All right, David, do you want to go over what you were kind of thinking?
Sure. So
It's
it
up
looks
on the
like a lot of,
screen. No, I was just letting them know it's up there. They can't see it, but it's up there.
oh, okay. So it looks like a lot of changes, but it's not a lot of substance that's been changed here. Actually, it's very little. In the current version of the bylaws, all of this text is smashed together into one paragraph. And so I separated it out by sentences to make it a little easier to digest. The first sentence here says, the town council shall do a bunch of things by vote of the town or any board and/or commission or town officers. And I understand the language, but I think to conform the bylaws to what's actually on the government website, it says boards and committees, and all the commissions are listed under there and are considered committees. So mostly this is just changing the word commission to committee.
Okay.
So I don't think there's any, I'm just making it conform to what is actually shown on the website.
Makes sense.
Is that gonna make it, so something like the Conservation Commission, right? That's in the name, but you're
Yes.
saying it makes no relevance, or there's no difference on the town website.
Well, right now, the first sentence doesn't contain the word committee. It says commission.
But it looks like you're striking out commissions.
And replacing it with committee, because that's what we're actually calling committees, and commissions are sort of lumped under the word committee. And I just wanted to make that, I mean, that's the
That's
current
on the
practice.
state.
Hmm?
Like you're saying, from the state level, it's listed as committees, right?
No, on the Walpole government website.
The local government website, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you go to the main navigation bar, and if you look at the drop-down, it says boards and committees. It doesn't say commission, it says committee. So that's all that I'm intending to do with that.
But to Doug's point, should we keep commission because we have?
I was thinking that too. Either that or have the Conservation Commission changed to the Conservation Committee to be in line with that.
I mean, I guess this is where town legal counsel would come in and say yay or nay, but I don't have any problem changing it if it's all considered the same thing. But my thought was just, is it gonna make a difference? Because I know them as a Conservation Commission, not the Conservation Committee. But
Most
cleaning
town
it up
committees
is-
are called committee, And very few, I mean, there's a handful, like the Conservation Commission, that are called commission. So I would not want someone to come along and read this sentence and say, oh, well, committees can't get advice of town council.
Yeah.
When there are a lot more committees than commissions.
But wouldn't it make more sense just to have committees and commissions instead of one or the other?
We can do that, yes. It makes the language in the bylaw a little more awkward to parse, but we can do that.
Might save some rewording on the town website for the conservation.
Boards and committees and commissions.
Making enemies on day one, huh?
/commission/committee.
Right, so the issue that I'm coming across, that I came across when I was reviewing this, if you look at the very next sentence, when requested by said board or committee of the town. So in the first sentence of the bylaws, currently, it says commission. And that word is not used again until commissioners in the very last sentence. Everything else talks about committees. So there's a mismatch
So I think
between.
committees should definitely be added in,
Yes,
absolutely. Whether we withdraw commission just because we do have one active mission, conservation, has to get involved with many building projects and different things in town, and often have to sign off on a lot of things.
well,
Projects
there's a
move
few,
forward.
actually. There's the Conservation Commission. There's
Commission.
Historical Commission.
I thought historical, yeah.
And everything else is a committee.
So I think board commissions and committees, I know it's a little bit awkward having all three. That would be my opinion.
We also have two councils.
Yeah.
Council on Aging and the Cultural Council. We could add boards or committees or commissions or councils, but see, now it's starting to,
EDC is also a commission, Economic Development Commission.
we also have a board of trustees. But I guess that's a board, technically.
I think what you said too, it becomes awkward when you mention commission in the first section and then not till the end, but in, the midst of the bylaws for the town council, it more refers to committees. So it does, it's not consistent through that section.
It's really not. I draft legal documents all day, so that inconsistency jumped right out at me. So this was my humble attempt to fix that. And if no one has a problem with commission, I can't imagine that they would have a problem with committee. But again, the reason that I suggest a change is to just make it conform to what the website says. But yeah, I'm open to any kind of amendment here.
All right, so that one may be on further review, and we'll keep looking at it.
Okay. Next, just a couple of text cleanups. The next sentence, actually, let me take a step back here. So the first sentence says that the town council can do things by vote of the town or any board and/or commission, or by town officers. And my reading of that sentence is that there's two distinct groupings there, right? The town can vote, or the board or commission can vote to get advice of council, or town officers can get advice of council. And the next two sentences seem to back up that division because, I should say the next sentence in the bylaws as currently stand are a run-on sentence that combine both of those together. And so what I did here was I kind of ended the run-on sentence here and split it into two sentences, one that talked about boards and committees and the other one that talks about officers. So that was another change.
And that was something we discussed quite a bit last time, is what is town officer?
Right.
Was
and
it
so-
officer or official?
The word is officer, and officer, to my understanding, has a special meaning in this context because official is someone who officiates,
That's officer.
right? Like a referee is an official at a football game, but they're not an officer, right? An officer is an elected or appointed official.
So looking back from our minutes too, we talked, it says the phrase town officers as presented in the bylaws,
Right.
is what we were
The notes that
questioning.
you wrote, Doug.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
and that's, I thought there was another one. Yeah.
So who are the town officers? Would, the town administrator would be a town officer,
I would
right?
think so,
An
yeah.
RTM is a
clerk.
town officer, a chair, committee chair is a town officer.
But an RTM couldn't make the decision to involve town
No, and
council.
that's what our discussions were, that.
Yeah, and that's-
council,
Yeah,
the steps taken generally go through town administrator.
and
through
it's department heads.
um,
Yeah, and that,
Board,
that kind of struck me as being very, very strange, very bizarre, that you have a town government set up where people who are appointed get permission to talk to the lawyers, but the people who are actually elected don't. And that seemed to me to be very strange.
so who are you concerning?
RTM specifically,
So, but an
are
appoint-
directly
who are you
elected.
talking about as appointed?
huh?
Which roles are you saying are appointed can seek out legal counsel?
Anyone, the chair of a board or a committee
So
or.
you're saying like a FinCom chair?
Or FinCom chair. And to me, the way that the bylaw is structured, it distinguishes between boards and committees versus town officers. So to me, those are two sort of different groups of people. And they have different processes that are listed in the bylaw. So the question arose, well, who actually counts as a town officer? This is an unresolved question. I don't think we really came to any kind of consensus on
And so,
that.
and then we talked more about what's current practice. And current practice is, really, anyone can go to Jim,
Mhm.
and if it's, Jim was kind of, I don't want to speak for him, but was saying, you know, if it's a valid thing, I absolutely will always involve town council and not
Yeah.
just go by what my opinion is. Conflict of interest, you know, things like that. If a department head would like town council, but it's felt that it's not necessary because it's already been, you know, communicated last year, then maybe it ends up going to select board, and select board would, but in general, town council would not take the call for an RTM or town council opinion or something. It would really comes from Jim or the select board, that it would really involve town council.
Right, so maybe the course of action here is that, well, there's two procedures listed currently in the bylaw. One is that boards and committees go through the select board or their authorized agent, Jim. And, they get written authorization, and then they submit the legal question in writing to town council, and there's this process, right? And Jim came in and explained all of this, and that he's really kind of acting as a gatekeeper in that regard, to keep crazy questions off of the town council.
Or ones that have already been answered.
Or ones that have already been
Right, yeah,
answered,
just
and,
straighten it back up.
right? And the process for town officers, it says, council shall at all times furnish legal advice to any officer of the town who may require their opinion. So it's a different sort of process, and maybe the thing to do is to combine those and just have everything go through the same process. Talk to Jim or talk to the select board and get the permission and put that gatekeeping role on these officers, whoever they are.
Yeah, reading through this chapter of town council, it certainly is not what is current practice. When you read it, your opinions of how the process is and who may seek out town council and what is current practice is not.
Not.
It doesn't correlate.
How much things have changed since this was last done.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what do people here think about that proposal to just make the process uniform so that there is gatekeeping and so that you don't have the just random people, phoning up the lawyers?
And that makes sense. I mean, I know with the attorney that I deal with, he specifically asked that only 3 people ever communicate with him from our organization, so that makes sense, maybe in town hall to have like 3 people assigned as.
And I totally agree. I guess my concern, and I don't know that it's a concern, would just be for those individuals who don't feel comfortable going through the town administrator. Do we put something in here that says, you know, should you have an issue or should you not want to go to the town administrator, talk to the select board? You know, should there be something that
Are you thinking more
identifies-
personnel?
I don't know, you know, if an RTM, I mean, we've talked about RTMs not being town officers, but if there's somebody who doesn't want to go through Jim said he'd be open, he wouldn't want to exclude anyone, but if somebody just doesn't feel comfortable doing that, you know, Glenn was saying last week that the avenue would be to go to the select board. And if we memorialize it within the bylaw, and I don't know that that's a good idea, I'm just saying that it says in extreme instances, go this route instead, and I don't.
So, you've made some suggestions. Why don't we send, being that Jim is generally the one who contacts town council,
Okay.
let's send these suggestions over to him with our feedback of, you know, we're really concerned that when you read the bylaw, what is current practice that you reviewed with us does not match.
Mm-hmm.
These are the first round of suggestions,
Okay,
and see what he says.
okay, I like that.
I think that would be the first set of drafts, because I think it needs some tweaking. It needs some adjustments so that it's clear.
All right, well then, if I could just very quickly explain what I've done so that everyone here understands what we'd be sending over to Jim. The big changes here are in the second sentence here, and a lot struck out and a lot's added, and really all that I did was I just moved the operative clause closer to the front of the sentence. So you don't have to read 300 words to figure out where the verb is. That's really the big change there. And the rest of it is just cleaning up language and making it consistent throughout the bylaws, or throughout this particular bylaw. You know, the bylaw says council in a bunch of places where it means town council, so I added the word town.
Yep.
So things like that. But those were basically the changes.
All right, so we'll make that, I'll put that in the action plan to forward that to Jim and get a first draft opinion on it.
Oh, and as regards specifically to the question of RTMs and their official capacity, RTMs vote on articles in the warrant. And the first sentence says, town council shall advise on all questions relating to warrants for town meetings. So it seems pretty clear to me that if an RTM has a question about an article on a warrant, they can find some way to talk to town council about it.
And
Yeah.
I will say that town council's opinion, because the warrant does go through town council prior to it being finalized,
Mhm.
there is opinion generally on every article that is in the
Mhm.
warrant.
Mhm.
On finance committee, often as articles are presented, town council's opinion on big ones would be, this was already town council's opinion on this. As in, just in the manner of FinCom, as we would debate it, sometimes that would come up as what was town council's opinion,
Yep.
and if it wasn't clear, Jim would get a secondary opinion on it and get something in writing back to us.
And I think that's because I mean, the way I read this is a town officer, you know, if an RTM would be a town officer, they could call up town council and get advice on anything. It doesn't have to be a warrant, it's any act relating to town affairs. So that's what I want to kind of prevent, but I also I don't want people to say, well, Jim won't let me talk to town council.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
what
Yeah, I got 2 things to say to that. The first is that town officers are limited to subjects concerning the duties incumbent on them by virtue of their office.
okay, and so that goes,
So, and basically, the only duties imposed on town meeting members is to vote on warrants, as far as I can tell. I don't maybe
Yeah,
I'm
I
missing
mean,
something,
unless
but-
they're advocating for somebody, I mean, it's not really, someone would say
Yeah.
it's your duty to go and
An
advocate on my
appointment to
behalf for
rules
this.
committee.
Yeah, but I mean, if somebody wants to butt into some committee because, because I'm an RTM, I get to have a say at a FinCom meeting, no, you can't. I would think that the language is pretty restrictive on that front. But when there are questions, the second thing is, what if there are questions specifically about whether or not town meeting is operating in compliance with the charter? Right? I mean, that's a legal question that should be, someone should be able to pose to town council. And I came up, a few years ago, because the charter says that in the spring, we consider the budget and capital items, and in the fall, we don't. And then the practice has been the past, at least a couple of years, to consider capital items in the fall. Is that in compliance with the charter? That's a legal question that town council should be able to answer. I did approach Jim at one point and ask him about it, and he said, oh yeah, we've got an opinion of council. And I said, can I see it? Nope. So that's a little concerning to me.
Yeah, and that's why I want to have another avenue, but at the same time, I think there should be some control. I think people should go through JAM, but when there's really an issue, when you ask for something and you're not giving it, you should have an avenue to be able to get that. And whether that's the select board or some other thing, I think it, should be spelled out just so people know, but
Yeah.
that's, I don't know.
All right, well,
I'll forward that first draft of revisions and, we'll work from there.
One other thing on this is, in the notes here, it says that town administrator discussed the issue with town clerk, confirmed that town officer refers to department heads. So should that be in the bylaw, identifying town officer as
Well,
department
when we were
heads?
talking about three, in my head, that was kind of like the three.
Yeah.
The town administrator, select board, and department head. And if it's something concerning, like I was more thinking HR, personnel,
Yep.
and that area.
Right.
And I don't know the personnel bylaws off the top of my head, but if there's a grievance, what is that pathway? I'm sure it's written down in
And
their,
there is a
personnel bylaws.
personnel board too, right?
No, we got rid of it.
oh, right, yeah, we got rid of that.
Wait a minute.
We removed the personnel bylaw, board last town meeting, and that now falls under the purview of select board.
Oh,
But
that's
no matter
right. I
what,
remember
as
that.
any,
Yeah.
HR department, anything, that if you have a grievance, there's, steps and protocols, whether it's your
Mhm.
immediate supervisor, department head, town administrator. I don't know that off the top of my head, what
Right.
we have in town right now, but
Yeah,
that
and
would be my other area when you're saying like town council, but what is the other avenue?
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize that there are structures within town government that are not necessarily committees or boards or commissions, we have departments. And, those department
An HR
heads.
department.
Yeah, HR department, police department, fire department, and so the department heads are not technically on a board or commission or committee, but obviously, if the chief of police needs to ask a legal question, obviously he should be allowed to do that, right? So, I think those department heads are clearly town officers. It's just a question of,
But our human resources, our town on the website is not identified as an HR person. It's benefits coordinator, and the assistant town administrator are the human resources department. There's no official title of HR. I don't know if that's, I think that's weird.
Well, that's, I think, more of a question, do employees know who are the individuals that they can go to in each department? All right, so this is what we have right now for our first round of suggestions for chapter 45, which is town council. Let's move on to chapter 88, which is finance committee.
All right, so finance committee, we had a couple of minor changes, which I just pulled up, and it was really to make gender neutral language and to adjust, the language said that the finance committee should, in the month of July, elect from its membership a chair, vice chair, all that stuff. We've never met in July, so we both kind of wanted, and Jeff also on Finance Committee said we should just change this to be something different. So I just suggested, saying that at the first regularly scheduled meeting following the annual town election, membership should be chosen. And I had I wasn't sure, I was just kind of playing with language. Another suggestion was to consider, first regularly scheduled meeting to consider items on the spring/fall town warrant. I think I was trying to stay away from town election, and just, because the Finance Committee deals with warrant items, I was just trying to make it a little more specific to warrant, like when we meet to discuss the warrant as opposed to after the town election. I don't know that there's a difference. I was just sitting in the car saying, let's try this. So they're two different, it's like suggestion one is this, and then the other one is suggestion two, if that makes any difference. Dave looks really intent, so.
I'm just trying to read it, that's all. It's new glasses.
I just always wonder if
Thank
the
you.
election of officers should require a change in chair, vice chair
I'm sorry, say that
session.
again?
I always wonder if the election of officers at each new session should require a change
Oh.
in the chair and vice chair.
I think that's, my personal opinion is, I think that's good in some cases. I mean, but I don't just want there to be change. Because I like our chairman, and I like the way he leads committees.
I would say it depends on the committee,
yeah,
not to butt
and
in,
that's what I
but
was
it
gonna
kind of
say.
depends on the committee. So
Yeah.
Finance Committee, the chair, the vice chair, the secretary, those roles.
There's a lot of historical,
There's
institutional knowledge that's
and
really.
even when you join Finance Committee, the first year is such a learning curve. The pool of people that would be comfortable in the role of the chair, because the chair also presents, since it's the motion for the articles of town meeting and such, they also have the introductory letter that they manage for
And the
town
warrant,
meeting and are upfront, ready to report on anything. So you kind of need to know so much back data, historical data, to really provide an accurate opinion to town meeting. It's a difficult.
I think it's great that the select board does it every time, and the school committee does it every time, and planning board never does it.
I know what you mean, and I'm simply looking at this. I know
What
on the
experience
rec
you
committee, we
have.
switch. It's elected, but they do.
So, Doug and I were both on Finance Committee together, so in Finance Committee, it is voted on. So when Finance Committee comes together, it's an appointed board. After the election, new appointments are made to it, and it is voted upon at the first
Yep.
meeting, chair, vice chair, secretary.
And there have been competitions for seats.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking more broadly, not just finance committee.
And that's the lens
I
that
know,
I'm looking
yeah,
at.
and that's
so
what
I-
this is finance committee.
But in any case, I think the chair versus chairman,
Yeah,
that's, an
Pretty
easy
easy.
fix, and it's just, what's the language regarding when people should be elected, or when the membership should elect its chair.
Oh, right, the month,
Yeah,
first meeting.
sorry.
When do you have your first meeting?
It's usually,
August.
yeah. I think this year it was actually September. I felt like it was, because the warrant closes on the 23rd, and we probably wouldn't meet until after the warrant's closed. And so now all of a sudden you're getting into Labor Day.
No, sometimes we do meet, because the language
Do
is
they?
already pretty set for the warrant.
Mhm.
So it just depends how that schedule goes. I feel like that schedule's getting later and later.
Yeah, I
But
felt
we
like our
certainly
first
have
year
met,
we
like,
met
August
early,
25th.
yeah.
Can it just say the first meeting of the new session?
Well, that's kind of what
It-
Doug was.
that's kind of what I was,
proposing,
yeah.
That
alluding
makes
to.
sense.
And I said regularly scheduled meeting, just in the event there was some emergency, you gotta meet, just to, and I don't know that there is any difference, but,
This last year, there's been a few more meetings in June, other ones
Yep.
that were not typical, but.
Personally, I like the first option. I think it's good to, after you have a town election, you're sort of starting the next year, and it seems like an appropriate time to me.
Yeah, and that's, I also, I think I was also aware of the fact that we could change our town, finance committee members, their terms end on June 30th. So if you have a town election that's in October, let's say, you know, you've just appointed people and then you've got a town elect, I was just trying to, that was why the second one was in there. So I don't know that it matters, I think.
Before the spring.
Or if it's just one of those situations that I can't really think about, but if somebody's appointed on July 1st, I don't want to say, well, I guess July 1st, it's kind of before the town election, it's kind of after the town election if you're looking at it, you know, but I was just,
Usually appointments are set for the fall, when the fall warrant's reviewed, and then if anyone is to come mid-year, appointed like that January timeframe for the spring warrant.
All right, so now I have a question, and this is my lawyer mind kicking in. So the bylaw says the finance committee shall elect from its membership, and it provides a particular time, right? Annually in the month of July. Does that prevent the finance committee from holding elections for those positions at other times of the year?
I don't think so, we just normally do it at our first meeting.
Okay.
It's just, that's what we've done in my 4 years on it.
I guess you could add wording saying, or as needed if somebody drops out or something.
Yeah,
And the reason I ask that question is that since the answer seems to be no, that the finance committee can elect these officers at any time, the purpose of this bylaw is really sort of a backstop to make sure that you're holding elections at least once a year.
I would say even select board, the first select board meeting post-election was just a reorganizational meeting of chair, vice chair, and clerk. So. I think it's scheduled, first regular scheduled meeting following town election is sufficient.
I agree.
yeah.
So we will put these changes and forward those to Mark Trudell, who's the current finance chair, and see his opinion on it.
Okay.
All right, so the next one is chapter 93, which is fiscal year. We had,
Nope.
Right?
Yeah, we had no change because it's the Commonwealth has a rule that cities and towns have to follow the Commonwealth's fiscal year, so.
Easy. That was an easy one. And then we have chapter 125, meeting of the town boards. This is one we had a little bit of discussion on, and this is one of the ones I had on my list of, do we need additional time to really review this one?
The language is up, and I'm just saying that, I was just throwing stuff at a wall. So we had talked about, you know, elected and appointed boards, we had talked about when people should, because it's about boards being available for Walpole Media, but not all elected boards are available. Like the Board of Assessors is an elected board, and they generally aren't covered, but the Finance Committee is an appointed committee, but they are generally covered. So there was a big discussion about who should be allowed to, or who should be open to the public.
And if Walpole Media, there are constraints of Walpole Media, the number of meetings being held, and if they would be able to cover that as well.
And if you require coverage, but then the coverage isn't available, do you have to cancel a meeting?
And
all that?
with the governor's rulings for remote Zoom and that availability, we've had meetings on Zoom that weren't live broadcasted, but recorded and then made available
That's
on
true.
Walpole Media. So that may not be something that's an option anymore either.
So, thinking back on that discussion, something that Doug said just prompted me to look at this again. And it says that boards within the town shall make open sessions of their meetings available for recording and broadcast. It doesn't say that they must be broadcast.
Yeah.
So, sort of reading it through that lens, does that change anything in the discussion that we had before?
You know, you're taking a different, the wording, and you're saying it shall, where last meeting people took the shall as like a positive and a negative. You know, like, in the positive sense, shall, they must make them recorded and available.
make them available for recording. It doesn't say must be recorded,
I think that's what our discussion
right?
was more, shall, is it a positive or a negative? Shall in the sense of
Yeah.
it must be recorded and made available, and shall in a negative of just kind of like, you have to be open to that. You know, like you can't have a closed meeting, you have to be open that it could be recorded. That's what I'm saying, was a positive and a negative.
Yeah,
I guess
that's-
We were kind of looking at it in two different lenses last week.
Yeah, that's why I was looking at this word available and having it carry a lot of weight. Yeah, I certainly agree with the discussion that we had before, that not all boards can be recorded just due
Right.
to Walpole Media, resource constraints. But whether or not they should be available for recording, subject to those constraints, is a different question.
That really limits where you can have meetings, I mean,
Yes, you can't have a meeting in my living room.
dungeon,
No.
please.
Dungeon, okay, well, we'll talk afterwards.
And I think before, just in the bold, open sessions of meeting of elected boards to be available for broadcast by cable television.
Yeah, and that's just the open sessions, not any executive sessions or, private conversations that need to be had.
But I think the discussion was that there are elected boards that are not currently recorded, so they would never be available for broadcast by cable television.
Now, is that by,
I think it's the bold where it's more, is heavier than the available, which is underneath.
So it says it shall make open sessions available. Doesn't say you have to.
Doesn't say it has to.
Doesn't say there's no, you shall.
And I think this was just about like cleaning it up, it wasn't really,
I think it almost contradicts itself.
Yeah, kind of does.
Because if you read the bold, 25-1, open sessions of meetings of elected boards to be available for broadcast by cable television. And then in the next line, it is taken as it has to be open to be recorded.
to be available for broadcast, available for recording and broadcast? So, I'm sorry, I didn't catch it earlier. What elected boards do not make their open sessions available for broadcast?
Board of Assessors.
Assessors.
And
Are
it's not that they're,
historically are not
yeah,
recorded.
Now, historically are not recorded is different than
Yeah.
available to be
I
recorded.
think the discussion was, why are they not?
Yeah,
If select board is, if sewer and water is, I'm trying to think of some of the elected boards.
Planning board.
now,
Planning board,
Board of Health,
Board of
maybe
Health
those are
is-
just
Board
Zoom
of-
meetings.
Board of
Yeah.
Health
Board
is
of Health
elected.
is- Oh, no,
Right,
they're
Board of
not.
Health is elected officials.
but again.
Anyways, so those elected boards are always recorded and always broadcast.
Mhm.
But we do have one library, library trustees.
Trustees, yeah.
So there's a few.
Now, if,
Kind of the smaller, trustees, commissioner, committees that are not.
I guess my question is, if Walpole Media went to the head of the Board of Assessors and said, hey, we'd like to broadcast your meeting. I mean, under this bylaw, they can't refuse. Right? Now, if the reason that historically those meetings were not recorded and broadcast is because of Walpole Media resource shortage, then okay, I get that, as long as, but if Walpole Media went to the Board of Assessors and said, we want to broadcast your meeting, and they said no, I think we'd have a problem.
So what does anyone feel about a change that should be on this?
Housing Authority also.
You what?
Housing Authority also are elected.
So it's not just one, Board of Assessors is the first one, but as Nancy's going through the list, and pulling up a few,
The calendar.
whether Walpole Media has the availability. And should it be,
Yeah, and just, I think taking a step back here, why do we have this bylaw? And when I read it, it's government openness and transparency, and here we've got these elected officials and they're holding meetings on town business, right? So, you know, that's sort of why I take it that we have this bylaw here. So sort of with that in mind, if some boards, I mean, if nobody, I don't know how many people want to sit around and listen to assessors talk. I mean, no offense to anyone who might be watching, but, you know, and if that's the reason why the meetings aren't broadcast, then okay, you know, I get it. But in the interest of openness, you know, that's, I think it is a good bylaw. And I know, and I think we had this conversation before, that there are some appointed boards whose meetings are broadcast. We're sitting in one. And the current bylaw doesn't make that necessary, but I think it's a good idea, you know, for it to at least be available.
like, so this board, finance committee is always historically recorded, capital committee is not,
Yeah, they have been during the COVID times. but-
right, personnel board always was.
Yep.
Are the minutes of the, yeah, they are. It could say either broadcast or minutes available somehow.
Well, minutes would follow under another bylaw, which would be the records and reports.
Which we had an extensive discussion about
Yes.
entirely separately from this.
So that, and I think this is, alludes to David's openness of government and communication. So that goes to the minutes of meetings, which is the next chapter, and kind of this, they go hand in hand a little bit. So there are elected boards, committees, commissions, trustees that are currently advisories, that are currently not recorded. But as stated in this bylaw, they just must make it available. So, do we want to add this to the list of further discussion? I feel like we have members that are not here that maybe have a stronger opinion on this
Yeah.
than what we have right now.
I agree, but I like your change, Doug. I'm a big proponent of open government and transparency.
Yeah, I am too. I don't want it to be too much, and the idea that Walpole Media might not be able to cover every meeting, you know,
And like I said, I think it's the bolded part. I almost feel like if you then take away that available in the secondary part, but do we have the means to make sure that they're all recorded?
All right, I see available up in the bolded part too.
But it's kind of in a different reference, though.
how many rooms do we have that can have recordings? We've got the select board room, the finance committee room, the old finance committee room.
They set up recordings at sewer and water, down at the sewer and water building.
But if it's the
some
type of thing where you have
Community room.
4 meetings in one night,
The library has
Yeah.
a number of,
Senior center?
senior center has recording available.
Then I know somebody who could answer that question.
Patrick cannot be in multiple buildings at
Yeah.
the same time.
I was just curious if
The
it
robots?
if it was, like, just thinking about this building, you've got 3 rooms, and so
So
if there were
let's-
4 committees. it wouldn't-
Let's reach out to Tamara, is who I communicate anytime with when I, give her our, next meeting and times and see, how that workforce is
Her
going
input,
and how
yeah.
they're covering them. Because sometimes there's a Wednesday night and there's 4 different meetings
Yeah.
going on in a night. It does happen.
Well, I
And
think,
there's
I
no
mean,
time limits either.
leaving the word available in there does make sense then, if there's,
Yeah.
you can't cover everything, and
Right.
if there's something really hot happening and people really want to see it, then they have to let them in, but, or reschedule their meeting to one of the rooms that works.
Yeah, and that,
Yeah, and I think that was Doug, that was a concern that you voiced, that,
I just don't wanna, I don't wanna worry about the logistics, you know? If all of a sudden you plan a meeting for July 7th at 7 o'clock, and it's supposed to be a quorum, and then all of a sudden, you know, people can't make it for whatever reason, you know, all of a sudden you're calling an audible and you're saying, I gotta run down the street to this board, or this room, or that room, I just don't want that to happen. That's why I'm asking the question.
All right, so I'm gonna add that to our list for further discussion. Let's send those recommendations over to Tamara, see what her opinion is, and find out more about the workforce of Buffalo Media. I think it would be hard to change it, that it all must be, because I
Yeah.
don't think we have.
I would not suggest that at all.
I don't think so either.
But I think it then falls very nicely into our next chapter, which is 177, records and reports. This discussion was about making available minutes, current minutes posted, agendas, meeting times, inconsistencies with boards, committees, commissions, trustees. What else, what other heading do we have?
I didn't do anything on this one, because I felt like this was still a conversation that had to be.
A further conversation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked about requiring timelines for posting minutes and agendas, and the idea of electronic records. Now, I really like the idea of electronic records, you know, keeping notes on your computer, that's really convenient. The whole requiring timelines for posting minutes is something that I'm a little reluctant to.
Put a hard number down.
Yeah, because in my brief experience doing this, it's the type of thing where I've got a day job, I've got kids, I can't always do it in as timely a fashion as I might like to do it, and so saying that I have to do it within 30 days is kind of.
I have a phrase for you. As soon as practicable.
Although,
As soon as you can get around to it.
could you put a harder deadline on for the boards and committees that have a paid clerk?
Well, see, I guess then, if all of a sudden are we paying them overtime because it's, you know, you require it within 30 days, it's the 29th day, they've got to work 6 extra hours of overtime to get those
And
minutes posted. I don't.
With some of our smaller committees, there's not, it's a volunteer amongst the committee. Historical Commission has always had a volunteer, whoever is the elected clerk or secretary of that board.
Yeah, you definitely can't put time constraints on volunteers. That's how you lose volunteers very quickly.
Yep.
And even this last session of FinCom, we had a lot of revisions. We did not vote on our meeting minutes
Yeah.
from the entire spring session until after, was it after town meeting?
Yep. Felt like it was June.
So if
yeah.
you were looking for FinCom minutes on the website prior to town meeting to see what was the discussion, you would not have found them.
I think even at the beginning, we were voting on last fall's.
Right.
So it's.
It was unusual. It was an unusual year, but the person who was the person who took the minutes
Took the
for
minutes isn't.
like 15 years no longer did it. So it was a changeover to like new process.
Can I ask you a question about that, though? Were all of the meetings of FinCom recorded and
Yes.
broadcast?
Yes.
To
Right,
address
and that's why I said they
Nancy's-
kind of tie one to the next. But it can be challenged, again, going towards that, how do we have open meeting, open communication, transparency in government?
Yep.
So I had David, were you and Brad on this one? Is that who we have listed on this one? Not to put you on the.
Let's see, this is
This is records and
177.
reports.
Yeah, I have David, if that's not accurate.
Yeah, that's what I have.
Put you on the spot.
Unfortunately, yeah, so I agree with the discussion that we've had so far, that this is an ongoing issue that has not yet been resolved, so I did not prepare any changes for the meeting tonight. I'd like to sort of figure out where we're going before I put anything to writing.
Okay, so then I'm gonna add this one to the list of further discussion. And I think we also need to communicate with the town clerks, because it's really, I think most of it falls upon them of posting, agendas, making sure that,
Well-
open meeting laws are, people are compliant with them and getting those agendas 48 hours in advance.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with Jeff's suggestion last time, that if it's on the bulletin board, it should be on the
The website.
website.
So that could be a language change,
Yeah.
posted in
So,
the public, in town hall as well as
Online.
on the town website. So that could be stronger language that would be added.
okay, would you like me to reach out to Liz, or Ally, is that something that you would prefer to do yourself?
I can reach out to Liz on this one, because we don't have any real language yet,
Right.
revisions, so. Okay. Next one is chapter 182, Recreation Committee, and I feel like we had minor changes that we were talking about for this section.
So this one, I had a
think you were on this
question.
one, right?
I had a question about associate members, which was just a general question.
Yep.
And when we asked that general question to the town administrator, he came back with proposed changes, talking about how the recreation director reports to the recreation committee as opposed to the town administrator. And I understand, he or the comment that I got was he would want that cleaned up. So the recreation director is appointed by and reports to the town administrator. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that. But it got me, when I was looking at this language, I really don't think it's an issue at all. I have not spoken to the chair or any of the members of the recreation committee about this. I think it probably makes sense. There was language in here about the committee submitting a budget annually, and I removed that language because it wouldn't, the committee's gonna vote on a budget and the director's gonna present it, but I feel like it's really the town administrator working with the rec director to come up with a budget, and it's not necessarily a committee budget. But that's where I wanted to reach out to the committee chair and just kind of get his opinion on that. So it was something that was a relatively simple change. It just got me thinking, and I don't know that it's a big deal. I'm just curious what the thoughts are if again, the budget really isn't submitted by the committee. I don't remember, I'm an associate member, I don't remember voting on a budget. But it could be that we have to clean that up a little bit too.
I would say probably current practice is more that the department.
It's the department head, yeah.
The department head puts forward a budget to the town administrator counters back.
Yep.
With a different line
Yeah.
number.
And is the department head would be different than the director?
Well, the director, right now, the director reports to the recreation committee. But the town administrator hires the recreation director. So it's kind of a conflict in who does he report to?
Well, then what's the role of the recreation committee?
They oversee, they have full responsibility for and full charge of all recreation activities sponsored by the town of Walpole, excluding only those under the jurisdiction of the school department. So it really is, it's, your T-ball, some of your younger sports, the town pools, the recreation basketball leagues, the recreation, the adult softball leagues,
So,
it's those types of things.
In your experience, what recreation committee, as far as the budget, does the recreation committee make suggestions, recommendations, saying we've noticed like fields or equipment, and saying, I think we really should focus it on that area more?
I think that there has been some of that. I can't come up with a specific example. I know that the recreation director generally makes comments about the budget. I think he mentioned that he always level funds it. It's just a matter of where, does Fields get an extra 25 grand and the pool gets 25 grand less? It's that type of plus minus. But what I remember, it's always a level funded budget. But he does give us, you know, the opportunity to provide input. I just don't know if there's ever a whole lot.
And that's based on receipts from, you know, obviously programming and things, so that's good.
Yep.
That budget is always kind of a ballpark of how many
Yep.
people sign up for T-ball, how many
Yep.
pool passes are sold, things of that nature.
Yep, some of their stuff is definitely funded by their revolving fund, and other things are, you know, some of the salaries are from revolving funds and some are town seats.
I feel really dumb, but who's the department head?
Yeah, that's kind of bugging me.
I don't,
Where does it say
Where's the state
department
department?
It
I
doesn't.
don't see department head, and you said the
It-
department head.
Recreation
it's
director,
director.
yeah, that may
It's a
be me.
director, it's not a
It's-
department head, it's a director.
Yeah.
So it's the recreation director is the department head.
Yes,
Yeah.
in this sense.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
a question that I
Sorry.
posed
Yeah.
earlier that it just doesn't say department head here anyway, so. Okay.
yeah, and that's really kind of bothering me. I mean, I look at this and I'm like, so we've got this section that talks about appointment, all right, and membership. Then we got powers and duties, and then suddenly we have a recreation director who's appointed by the town administrator and does nothing. I mean, it doesn't say anything, it just says, hey, we've got this recreation director who's appointed by the town administrator. Well, okay. I
What
mean,
is
What do
this-
they do? What are their responsibilities? Do they head the department? Do they report the budget, do they make
So
budget requests?
This, I think, what you would look at next would be the description, job description for recreation director.
But what does that even mean? Shall
So
be
I think-
subject to and under the
I think, though,
control?
when you put, I know, but when you put the title department head, I think, and when you're talking about the salary scale, it kind of goes into a different area. Is what my first, like, kind of thought goes to.
The language is weird.
Okay, so I guess my question is, what relation does the recreation director have to the committee?
He
Because
will,
that's not
Under the
really
control
spelled
of the
out here.
That was
Yeah.
my question too.
so when we have meetings, you know,
Yeah.
he leads the meetings, he gives an agenda, gives us an update on all the different activities that are going on, the scheduling that's taking place. We do have conversations about, you know, where to allocate resources. Should it be, you know, should we cut back, like the camps, right? We had a discussion about, you know, should they have camps up here and down at Walpole Woods, or because of the limited availability of staff, should they just keep it here? You know, there are discussions like that, but he'll lead all those things. He runs all the programming.
So, what I would say, let's ask for a job description then too, to
Okay.
see if it's worthwhile to add any additional language.
Yeah, I mean, it might be as simple as saying the recreation committee shall be headed by a recreation director, period. That would satisfy my inquiry here, because it doesn't really provide any sort of relationship. I mean, the way that's written now, the recreation director shall be subject to and under the control of the recreation, okay, so it's the water boy, right? Go fetch me this thing, right? You're under my control and direction. So,
The
You know,
verbiage is odd.
All right, and so I think we need to add a little bit more. I think how this is reading is that the recreation committee has more control, but in essence, the recreation
Yeah.
director has more control of running the rec department. And the committee is
That
more of an
exactly is
advisory
how it's
board.
reading
Yeah.
to me.
and that's what I would like to see reflected in the language here, yeah.
The other thing that we.
But does it become, because it's a select board appointed board, and so it's probably not an issue that the recreation director reports to the town administrator as opposed to the committee members who are appointed by the select board? But I don't,
The director is a paid position,
yes,
the committee is not.
right. I'm just thinking the way, you
Yeah,
know,
I'm
the
just-
select board is saying, we want you to be in charge of this, but now the town administrator kind of has control over the rec director.
My other question, so let's check in with the recreation director about if there's any additional thing, find the job description and review that to see if there's any additional language you would think that should be added. And then the next question with part of our discussion is, do we have anything about the appointed members? You left alone, was there any language we wanted to add in, because that was a question we reviewed.
So,
Of
I
a number
was-
of 5.
yeah, I'm okay with the number of members. As we discussed it last time, but I was really curious about how the associate members come up, because there's no language here about associate members, but there are 2 or 3 associate members, and the general consensus, because I'm sure you haven't watched the tapes yet, but it's kind of like when there's a desire for public involvement, they come up with associate positions, and so that's why you see it on the Trails Committee, the Recreation Committee, maybe the Board of Health, things like that, and not other committees. That was my general question, but I don't have a problem with the 5 members.
So I think, did
There's
we
all-
have that under the purview of select board to add additional members?
I don't know that we just, I think, would it depend on where,
I think
who's in
that
charge
would-
of it, right?
I
mean,
think that would be the only thing that maybe could be added if we felt like we wanted a little bit more flexibility in that.
yeah, and I don't know that it's necessary. Again, I was asking the general question, is there a formula? Because
Right.
some people have associate members or some groups do and some don't.
Yeah.
And it was more of a institutional question as opposed to we need to change it.
All right.
Um,
So we have some action items that we need to take on. I'm gonna add chapter 182 to our list of a little bit of additional feedback and comments that we'll need from. So let's move on to chapter 187, which was revolving funds. I had that we had minor changes that we needed for this.
we-
I know you may be waiting for feedback
Yeah.
on this one as well.
It's both minor, and I don't even have anything up, because we have minor changes, but we also are waiting for feedback. We reached out to the finance director to see what types of, I'm pulling it up, we have various revolving funds around the town. The one that I'm gonna use as an example is the Turco Field and Turf Replacement Fund. We now have 3 fields, turf fields in town, so saying the Turco Field replacement isn't appropriate anymore, so we're gonna change that title. But then, when you look at the uses, or the fund limits, so the spending limit for a turf field is for the replacement fund is 508,000, and is that annually, or that's just the limit? And so maybe that's fine, but we reached out to the finance director to make sure she was okay with the funds and the scope of funds, the scope of what each program does. Maybe the Council on Aging provides meals, but it doesn't provide vaccines, and so it would be expanding scope or limiting scope. And reviewing the dollar values to see if 508,000 to replace turf fields is enough,
Doesn't Adams Farm Committee has a revolving fund too, I believe, but it's not listed on here.
And that's the type of thing that we look for.
And I think the net metering fund would
The net
be
metering fund,
removed, right?
we can remove, yeah.
Due to state DOR requested changes in how the town handles the funds.
Yes. So we definitely have at least 2 adjustments to this bylaw. It's just whether or not we have more. And something like Adams Farm, I don't even know that that's listed here.
It's not listed there right now.
So that's the type of thing that we'd want to add if they have revolving funds, so.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they do.
All right, so we're gonna move on to, that one will need additional information and just
Yeah.
waiting upon feedback. So we'll move on to chapter 195, which is select board. This fell under David, but I feel like in our discussions, and we didn't really have questions.
Yeah, I don't,
think that we had really major changes to make to this.
Yeah.
I'm recommending no action on this one.
And that's what I had on my list, was this was actually fell under the no action. All right, chapter 202, which is surplus disposal.
So this was, Brad inherited it from Emilio. So,
I don't think he's really looked over it. This is a pretty, is this a pretty short one?
I'm trying to pull it up. Okay.
Walpole shall comply with state law.
Yeah. I know. So I had this on my list as no action.
I think that's probably
It's
a
we must
fair-
comply with state statute,
Yep.
So that was on my list of no action, and then chapter 210, town collector.
GL 30B.
that fell under,
I think this was
Brad,
also Brad,
Lecter.
yeah. This seems pretty simple too.
and I think on this one I had no action.
Ah,
And Jim didn't bring this forward as anything that he was thinking needed adjustments as well. You can go with that to Jody.
Yeah,
Sure.
because what I'm thinking is that the changes from Marilyn to Jody, and I thought the position changed slightly.
Okay. So we are gonna put that on our Jody list.
I'm sure the substance hasn't changed, it's just whether or not there's some minor administrative thing.
And then our last one is chapter 219 of town meeting.
And this,
Oh, do you have something, Brad?
Dave,
yeah.
Dave, sorry.
Can-
I'm looking at the-
Okay, so I think I understand now why we have that language for disposal of surplus in chapter 202, because that kind of struck me as weird, like, why do we need to have a separate bylaw to say that we comply with state law? And without diving into huge details in municipal law, Walpole can adopt various provisions of state law that some towns adopt and some other towns don't adopt. And I just looked it up. Chapter 30B is the Uniform Procurement Act. So it doesn't really have anything to do with surplus supplies as such. So the bylaw just says that we want to use uniform procurement when disposing of surplus supplies. So I don't think that really necessitates any change in the no action, but I think it's more background as to why we have that bylaw in the first place. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention.
Thank you for looking that up so quick. So then, chapter 219, town meeting. This one I had minor, I also feel like this may be on the list of additional time. I think the big
Yeah.
discussion on this, as I kind of scroll down,
it
was
was,
timing of town meeting and the
Um,
charter,
I-
and what other questions do we have on this one?
well, we
Posting
We
things
talked
in-
about
Postings.
removing the postings at the two precincts, two locations in each precinct, and adding, you know what, and I may have actually done this.
Yeah, the notes I have on that are replacing that two public places language with online and town hall.
Yeah,
The warrant, the language should change, town administrator recommendation would be bylaw language to change the recommended that the warrant be available online in town hall, at the town's clerk's office, and at the library.
and I just changed it to two public places. I didn't specify the library or town hall, I just had two public places and on the website, but it could be more specific than that.
I think having the specified places is probably better. Otherwise, it's, who knows where,
Yeah.
posted in the men's room somewhere where nobody sees it.
I
So
have no problem with that.
I think those were just the minor changes we had discussed. I'm just looking through it one more time.
I agree completely, Sue, and I think that the town hall is an entirely appropriate place
Yeah.
for that kind of a public posting. It's not like the town hall is going to go away anytime soon, we hope.
You hope.
All right, and I think that is our list. So Doug, did you have the minor changes done on 219, which is town meeting, or you didn't have that one out?
So I can,
No, just so I have my list of like articles we discussed no changes to, what we had minor and what we need additional kind of action items feedback on.
Yeah, this one I just have to say, it's, town hall and the library.
Okay,
Does it say town hall?
No,
It does
it
not.
says in at least 2 public places in each precinct, I removed, and it's up there, I removed in each precinct and just kept 2 public places.
Okay.
But we'll change it to,
Including,
and did you put?
well, if you say including, is it 2 public places plus these locations, do I just put town hall and library?
well, it says at least.
Yeah.
So,
I think if you just make it easy and just so there's no question of where it's posted, town hall, library, online.
And available at town clerk's office.
And
Usually
is
they're
that
kind
town
of-
hall, or do we have to?
But usually they're like on the table, and then I
ah,
think putting ownership on town clerk, that you may always go to the town clerk to achieve. I was just looking at the notes that you wrote from the minutes to see what Jim had suggested.
Mhm.
Um,
He definitely said in the town hall, in the town clerk's office.
mhm.
I just kept it simple.
You don't think Liz will have any issue with that, do you?
No, I think she does it anyways. I think it's always, I feel like it is.
All right, well, I think that's a good list. So we have no changes, which we'll vote on at the next
Yep.
meeting to chapter 113, 34, 39, 93, 195, 202, and 210 tentatively.
Well, we're gonna
double
look
check.
more into disposal. We're gonna have Brad look into that. I don't want it to be a,
Oh, I know absolutely nothing about disposal.
and so I just wasn't sure, your comment was kind of, I don't think it needs to change the no action ruling, but you
Right.
said further.
All right, so we'll email,
Just don't know if we should look into it more or call it a no action.
I'm fine with calling it a no action. I don't think it.
I'll just let Brad know as well, though, if he's not watching our recording tomorrow night, that these 2 items, if he would like to add additional input. We have additional time needed for chapter 5, 17, 125, 45, 177, 182, and 187,
87.
as well as 219, this last one, but these are very minor. I guess just to double check in with our town clerk, Liz, to make sure that that language is appropriate. And we had discussed the minor changes to Articles 22 and 88. So I will get those all out to all of us so we know where we stand, but I think that's good progress.
It is,
Um,
and then if, I don't know what your plans were, but given that we are beginning to run a little short on time for the fall warrant, once we sort of have those votes, then would it be appropriate to immediately pass that along to?
Well, so that's what I put on my action item as well, because if we want to have recommendations available for the town warrant. So we're, part of the committee is to have a report available for fall town meeting of where we are. We will be asking, I think, for an extension just because animal control is not, specifically that one is not ready for a redraft just yet. But I feel like we will need to be ready for Board of Select will meet on the 2nd and the 23rd of August. 23rd is when the warrant closes. So I'm gonna check in with Jim concerning that, so it does not give us an extended amount of time. I have a quick list of action items that I can get to hopefully within the next 48 hours, for those small double checks.
And so the select board's gonna meet on the 23rd, which is when the warrant closes, so we can't really,
If the select board had any revisions
Yeah.
or did not agree, because we also need it to go through Jim and town council. So that's what I want to check in with Jim tomorrow
Yeah.
to see the timeline that we're at now.
Because we'd have to get it to them before the 23rd, which, for their meeting before the 23rd, which would
Would be
probably
August
be
2nd.
the night of the 2nd.
Yeah, and it has to go to town council too. Now, if town council has any kind of feedback or revisions of a minor nature, would that prohibit us from, presenting that particular chapter at the town meeting? Or is that something, I guess my question is, do we have to go to town council before the warrant closes?
I believe, yes.
can we,
If we're talking about language in the bylaws.
Okay.
That's my opinion,
Yeah.
but I'm gonna check in.
And I feel like we had this conversation during the first meeting about whether or not, I feel like we're in a position to have language for the warrant. And so do we just have an open-ended kind of warrant question, to consider recommendations,
Yeah, so that's what I'm gonna double check on, because I feel like we do have a, I just kind of listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 articles that we think there are we've reviewed, we've discussed, we feel that there are no action. Right there, that's kind of an easy motion to put forward on the town warrant as an article. These bylaws are no action, and that's what I don't know what the opinion will be of if, are we gonna vote on it at town meeting? Here's the general bylaws as a lump, all of them included with all revisions, which means something like animal control would really hinder us for being ready. Or can we do it as a chunk and just leaving out Article 5 and see if we can clean up, those other 5 items?
And then what happens? Do they sit and wait until we finish the rest of them and then they do all of them at once? Or
Right.
can they also take them and kind of implement them?
So I think we need to get opinion on that.
Yeah, my recollection from reading through the minutes of the last meeting of this committee was that each change that they were recommending had its separate article in the warrant. So if we can do that this time around, then we wouldn't need to wait for animal control. We could.
But, and I don't think the items that we are feeling that are no action would just be us updating, I feel like, a town meeting, not an article.
Yeah.
Because we're not gonna ask
We're
town
not gonna
meeting on
change
an
anything.
article for no action,
Right.
unless we were voting on all bylaw, all bylaws is a big chunk. But the ones that we have minor changes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 articles, if we think we could clean it up and have town council opinion, that would be 7 articles on the fall warrant of bylaws that we would recommend changes to.
And I think at the end of the day, this all boils down into when's our next meeting?
Right.
Uh,
So,
think
if
that's
we
what
can get these action items out the next 40 hours and get reviews from the people I've listed, such as Pat for different ones, we had quick little questions, Jody, Brad review, Liz from town clerk, Bylaw Media. If we can get those questions out real quick, send out the revisions, Mark Trudell for the finance committee one for approval on that. When we would like to meet next? In 2 weeks on the July 21st?
Checking calendars. We've generally been meeting on Tuesdays or Thursdays, I feel like.
Okay.
I'm not going away till August, so I'm available all of July for the most part at night.
Right. I am out until the 18th after today. So the 21st would work for me.
July 21st?
Yeah. And I think my kids have a swim meet, but I don't think that's a big deal. My wife knows how to get to that pool, so.
All right, so tentative, we'll put July 21st. We'll need, obviously, to have at least 5 members that would be able to attend. We will try to get more information. I'll try to get a full Google Doc folder so that Sue can kind of catch up on all the,
Okay, thanks.
all of everything that we
Thanks
have
for the homework,
discussed. We are recorded and all of our meetings almost happen on Bylaw
Yep.
Media, so you can find the past meetings. I think we're maybe up to like 6 meetings at this point, about, maybe more, lost count. All right, do we want to vote on minutes, or would we like to hold off until we have?
Well, the voting on minutes requires that Sue votes, and an
Yes.
abstention, because she wasn't part of the
Would mean that we
committee,
wouldn't have
would,
quorum.
Right.
or is it a vote? is an abstention a vote? I feel like we had this conversation all the
I
time.
think it removes the,
Okay, then we should wait.
then we should wait, because then we're at 4 to 3,
Yeah.
yeah. We don't have. Okay, so we will hold off on voting on these minutes from July 14th. We've set our next meeting date tentatively right now on July 21st at 7 PM. I will try to book this room again. Do we have any other business to discuss?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? All right, this concludes our meeting. Thank you very much.